What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast. My name is Drew, and I am the primary analyst here at fantasygolfbag.com. Most of you know who I am, but this week we'll be previewing the WM Phoenix Open. Pretty cool field, fun tournament to watch, assuming Scotty doesn't run away with it on a Friday afternoon. Somewhat like, turn down this a little bit like Justin Rose last week. So, last week we did a pretty full show. I think I'm going to save the deep dive into the FGB Studio for probably tomorrow night or Wednesday morning, and I'll do a special members only show for that. But again, if you are a member, obviously you know all the tools at Fantasy Golf Bag. I posted a LineupIQ full walkthrough. So if you are wanting to dive in and understand like the Fantasy Golf Bag betting model and how that leads into the projections for Showdown and Classic, walk through an entire show for building lineups, simulating lineups, saving lineups, importing lineups, doing everything that you want to do. I still need to do a contest sim walkthrough, but you can also dive into looking at the past contests and simulate those and see your ROI after every single lock. So been using that every single slate. Most good players do that anyways. And I've been relying on that quite a bit to start the season, just to see how people are starting to play, especially, with one event with Scotty. It's a little bit difficult to tell, but you can go back to any event from last year, the last couple of years, and see how people played Scotty. I think the biggest pro, I don't really know if there's any cons necessarily, but the biggest pro is you build a lineup on, let's just say it's a full slate, a full classic slate. You build a lineup on Tuesday or probably Wednesday night at midnight, like me. It looks good. Like you got the players that you like in there. You have an idea for the ownership. You have an idea for what the leverage is for that lineup and the players that you're picking. You have a concept of, the contest you're playing. If it's a small field, single entry, then you can eat a little bit more chalk. Maybe not. This is also a good tool for that. Or diving into a huge contest with 50,000 people. How does it vary with the ownership that you play? Is 30% played? Let's just pick out a random guy. Let's say Goddard's probably going to be up there. Let's say we'll say Goddard. We'll say Goddard's 30%. Is 30% Goddard as an example? 30% in a $100 300-man single entry, the same as 30% in a $5 58,000 person contest? No, it is not. That's obvious. So the sims, at least to get back to my first point, the post-contest sims are really a way to kind of post-research your strategy for every single slate. So we found that in a couple. We had a good dialogue last Friday or Saturday on some of the top players in Showdown, which you guys probably all know some of the names, but there's a consistent theme that you can see in LineupIQ on how they construct lineups for different size contests. It's very, very evident. So diving into that, understanding, where you went wrong. So like there's been a few times where mostly in Showdown, I'll just lean on the projections. In full slates, I'll lean on the projections, but there's a few spots where I will tinker and move guys around. So again, it's kind of reliant on the projections being accurate, which in all of our back testing and everything, it's probably, I would say, compared to others, it's very accurate for predicting the outcomes in a bimodal distribution for golf. So the caveat there is it's relying on them being accurate, but you can see clearly that certain plays at a certain ownership are very, very minus EV. So that's a good way. If you can go in there, search any contest, you can look at players you admire, maybe players you want to see. Man, every contest I play, they're always in the top 10. I could think of one guy all the time. Can't fade me. Who was a Fantasy Golf Bag member. I think probably when Sky was here. Maybe he left after Sky left, but it was probably 2 years ago now. And he's a crusher in most sports, but if you look in Showdown, he's always at the top. And you can look at his exposures with McLovin's kind of in the same, but they play completely different styles. So it's a very interesting research project if you have the time to dive into lineup IQ. But all that's to say is you can look at any of these guys that you admire, you see them in your contest and wonder, what are they doing? And we have a bunch of metrics on what their lineups look like, how they're constructing players together in combinations. Obviously, you can look at salaries and stuff like that. The salary stuff's kind of difficult. Like I'll just use an example from this last week. There was obviously everybody was jamming half the field that was playing the North Course. And there were some top players that were playing basically, there was a few in the 49,000 range lineups all the way down to 42,000. They're literally leaving $7,500 on the table. So there's a lot of different ways to strategize and research and understand what good players are doing. The other thing is to research your own play and make sure that you're making good decisions when you build lineups in certain contests. So yeah, I would recommend you check out the video. You can find that in our video library, I think is what it's called. You can check out the lineup IQ tutorial, then jump into lineup IQ and obviously build lineups, simulate the lineups, build a portfolio, etc. But the research stuff is pretty fun. And honestly, I could lose hours a day going through researching showdown slates, late showdown slates, just seeing what the nuances and what the good players do. Because it's not as cut and dry as, well, they just faded this guy that was 28%. No, they played him at 25%, just under the field. But everybody else that they paired together, they didn't pair the chalky pairings. The geo mean was, 9 to 7% and not 20%. But in the 555, they had a geo mean of like 27%. So there's a lot of interesting stuff. So I'd recommend you check it out. If you're not a Fantasy Golf Bag member, there's still plenty of resources that are free. We'll talk about a few of those tonight, but did want to mention that for the lineup IQ, because I think every single showdown slate that passes, classic, obviously you got one lock, you look at it and kind of go on with your day. But for showdown, it's like, okay, what are we going to go for on Friday? And you're going to play the North Course guys. And you see what everyone played. Obviously, they all jammed the North Course guys, but maybe they jammed certain groups. I know Kurt loves some group action, probably in multiple different facets in that description there. But yeah, every single day, looking at the showdown stuff and understanding what guys are doing and versus what you're doing, and then understanding how your lineups compare to the fields that you're playing against. So recommend you check out the lineup IQ tool for sure. All right, let's dive into the golf course. Let me pull that up. And we'll jump right into it. So as always, appreciate everybody tuning into this podcast. I promise, try to get a couple guests on. Been talking with Axis. Sky just seems too busy and obviously just making too much money with his golf betting and his DFS play anyways. Not to say Axis isn't either. He might be doing better than Rufus from what I've heard from other people, but might get Axis on and a couple other guests. So you won't just hear from me solo all season. But as always, I do appreciate you guys tuning in. Hopefully you find some insight into this. I do try to take a different approach from my background in golf than just spewing stats, which most people don't even understand anyways, which we've talked about every single week. It'll probably be ad nauseum by the time the Masters rolls around. But let's dive into it. Hopefully you guys gather something from this. Like I said, we'll probably just hit on the golf course. And then obviously I want to put out a lot of content for, people on that follow Fantasy Golf Bag and follow myself on Twitter, but there's obviously some reservation for the people that are actual subscribers. So again, I encourage you guys to sign up and check it out. If you guys are looking for a promo, you can reach out to me. I'm happy to assist, and you guys can check out some of the new tools for 2026 I think you'll be pretty impressed. So TPC Scottsdale this week for the stadium course, really good field, which we'll look at here in just a moment with Scotty Scheffler at 14,500. Next highest, Xander off a miscut, 10.5. So we'll get into that in a second. Par 71, 72.61. You can see the golf course here. I have a couple notes I'll bring up as I get into this in just a second. If I can find my notes. Okay. So yeah, 72.61, par 71. We'll jump down into this middle section here in just a second. But for the average par 3, 188 yards, average par 4, 439, average par 5, 556. You can see here by the scoring averages, which is not too surprising. Par 3s typically play over par on the PGA Tour. I always like the analogy. I haven't used it this year yet, but I want to do it right now. The analogy is if you go play a 4-man scramble in your local fundraiser for whatever, high school golf team or Twin Peaks, whatever you want to do, you're going to make birdie on all the par 5s, maybe eagles. You're going to birdie most of the par 4s, hopefully. And the par 3s always seem to be the holes that we can never birdie in a scramble. It's ridiculous because you have to hit one shot. I don't know how that's even possible mathematically, but it always seems like, a par 4, you got to hit a tee shot, then a bunch, everybody hits a second shot. For some reason, it's really just another second shot on a par 4. Par 3 birdies in a scramble are very hard to come by. And if you can, make one or two, you're doing great. But I know that's a silly analogy, but I do like to use it because every time I play in a scramble, I'm always pissed that we par 3s in a scramble, but we birdie all the par 4s. It makes no sense. And then eagle par 5s. Like we make 3s on par 5s and we make 3s on par 3s. Everything doesn't make sense. So, yeah, par 5s are very easy. The third hole here, the 13th hole. You can see some of the par 4s. Make sure my volume's good. Return to par minus 0.65. So, 0.65 strokes under par. Nick Taylor won last year. I'm sorry, he won in 2024 at minus 21. Last year, Thomas Dietrich won at minus 24. Average winning score 17.75 under par. It's about 4 strokes easier than the tour average. So very birdieable, very scoreable golf course. Missed fairway penalty is easier. There's the rough isn't as penalizing. Funny enough, a lot of guys hit, the top of the leaderboard, which we'll talk about here in a second, hit a lot of fairways. Let's see. Driving accuracy down at 55.6%. Proximity also down, some bigger greens out there. I don't know if you've ever played PGA Tour 2K. This is the course you start Q school on, and shooting 67 seems difficult, but there are some bigger greens. Sorry, I'm going on some crazy analogies tonight. Hopefully that's a good sign of things to come. That's how I felt for the Millie Maker. So let's dive into the course correlations, because I think that's like the biggest edge this week as people kind of start to spout off stats. So as you can see, I'll come down here really quickly. One of the things people will look at is, there's an element of driving distance. Let's go back to 2024. An element of driving distance, but driving accuracy is really what people will start to look at. I think there's some miscuts in here. But the thing is with the correlations is it's all based on what those players brought that week. I want to see what can I use now and any other year in the past that's consistent. So apples to apples, 2022 on Wednesday night, I'm looking at this. This is what helps me build good lineups or pick good plays. In 2023, same thing. It's Wednesday night. What am I going to look at? I don't need to know what happened on Sunday night. Oh, well, if you just picked the guy that would gain 8 strokes putting, you would have won. Yeah. That guy was losing strokes putting every year for the last 3 years. He just happened to gain strokes putting. Oh, what about the top 10? Yeah. Half of those also were losing strokes putting. So looking at the leading correlations is an apples to apples comparison. And this is what we see. So again, early in the season, this is what we should expect until we start to get some weird spikes in recent form. But total strokes gained, number one. It's been number one every single week. So very simple in FGB Studio. Every model, you can start with strokes gained or spectrum. We have adjusted total strokes gained as well, which is field adjusted, which is what I use. But yeah, total strokes gained, number one. Strokes gained tee to green, number two. Makes a lot of sense. It's obviously very correlated, 75% correlated. Bogey avoidance, birdie or better, also highly correlated. It's just with ball striking stats. Guys that hit greens do not make a lot of bogeys. Guys that hit greens tend to also make more birdies than guys that miss greens, obvious. So a lot of this is somewhat double counting in a sense, but this is what we want to lean into. We just want to lead into very good, broad generalized stats that lead us into a direction of figuring out, is this like a binary decision? Is this person playing good right now or not? If they're not gaining strokes total, they're not playing good. If they're not gaining strokes tee to green, they're not playing good. If they're not, beating the field in bogey avoidance, they're not playing good. They're either missing greens or they're three putting. Either one is bad. And the missing greens can come from bad drives or bad approach shots. Both is bad. Birdie or better. I'm kind of a little lower on birdie or better because it's so dependent on putting or just par five scoring. It is relative to the field. So like on an easy course, someone can't just show up here and birdie or better. That's because they played Kapalua, which they didn't play this year, but just using that as an example. But as a stat from like my own background in golf, birdie or better is probably not the stat that I want to use. At least higher than the rest. Like I'm still using it, sure. But I think there's a little bit like if you completely X'd out birdie or better and use tee to green, use bogey avoidance, total strokes gained, you will get very close to great options for birdie or better without relying on the additional scope of did they make those 6-footers to make the birdie or better? That's what I don't really care about. But it does show birdie or better is the fourth most correlated stat this week. Strokes gained off the tee makes a lot of sense. Guys are going to hit a lot of drivers. Driving accuracy outside of a few holes doesn't really matter. Like you could see the missed fairway penalty is about tour average or just slightly easier than tour average. Distance penalty is also less than tour average. We'll look at driving buckets here in just a second, but you'll see there's a lot of drivers to be hit here. So obviously being good off the tee is good. That means both distance and a mix of accuracy. IQ stat is a blend. It's a very I'm not going to get into the calculations, but it's a blend of many of these already mentioned stats along with a few others. It's a great stat, just generally speaking, every week. Ironically, it's the sixth best this week, but I would still use it. I'm just saying you can see a significant drop off from correlations in finish position as you go from total strokes gained to tee to green. Okay. Bogey avoidance, birdie or better. Okay. Off the tee, a little bit of a drop. IQ stats about the same, and then another drop to green regulation. I'll just round out the last few, and then there's a huge drop is driving distance, strokes gained approach, and strokes gained around the green. Around the green, I don't typically use, but I'll mention why it's a correlated stat with finish position, mainly because of the par fives. If you look at the way the guys have to play these par fives inside of 50 yards, they played these same ones in a similar sense at the Farmers, and also last week. So, last week at the Farmers and also at the American Express. So the around the green is definitely worth looking at this week. I will also mention really quickly the lowest correlated stats. They're still slightly correlated, but it's much, much lower relative. I should probably add a relative toggle here for you guys. But stroke skating, putting, really low. Driving accuracy, really low. Basically, driving accuracy has no factor. It's nearly zero in terms of predicting who's going to play well here at TPC Scottsdale. Proximity to the hole, also a factor, which is interesting. I think that's partly because if you think through the Farmers, you got 3 rounds of shot link. Not everybody plays this week that played last week. And you only have 2 rounds at the American Express. Obviously, the Sony you have all four, which is a different proximity beast altogether. So I think there's a little bit of noise in the proximity, which leads to him being lower. Proximity is never a bad thing, but from a correlation standpoint, basically it's saying that there's guys that have shown decent correlation that don't finish well here. Look at other stuff. So you can think of it from the other side of that coin. I think that's it for the overall stuff. You can see the driving distance 302. Let's talk about the driving bucket. So the driver profile is balanced, kind of leaning into distance. Again, accuracy is not a big thing. It's obviously, I guess you could make, again, I'll just try to use analogies to get people across the line here for fantasy golf bag. But if you had two golfers, one, if you just picture, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor on the screen or the way you're listening to me. We have a gauge chart, and on the far left side is an accuracy side. Think about that, 0 miles per hour accuracy. Okay. On the right side is distance, maxed out 60 miles per hour. I don't know, 100 miles per hour, 180 miles per hour, whatever. You got the needle is pointing in the middle, but slightly towards the distance side. Now, when you think about that, you just like, what does that mean? It could be anybody. Basically, it's a blend of hitting it good, right? You're not really long, but you're not crooked. Yeah. If you think about this golf course, you have two players. One is extremely straight, but hits at 260 off the tee. You have another player that's 330 off the tee, but misses, I don't know. They only hit 40% of the fairways, or 1 in 3, like real bad, right? You want to play the guy that's going to be closer to the 330 off the tee. And that's kind of baked into strokes gained off the tee anyways. Like that's the math. The closer you are to the hole, the more you're going to gain off the tee. But just again, trying to use, I think there's a lot of misinformation on golf data out there. So try to clean this stuff up in a super simple way, which I'm not saying any of you guys listening are simple, but that's how my mind works. Is let me just bake this down into a simple analogy. Do I want a guy that's going to hit, Zach Blair's probably not the best example, but we'll pick on him for this case. He hits a 260 off the tee, hits every fairway. Do I want to play that, or do I want to play Brooks Koepka, who hits a 320, 330 off the tee, but he might hit 1 in 2 fairways. Like 50% would be great for Brooks Koepka. Yeah, I'll still play Brooks Koepka's driving. Now, the accuracy stuff or the iron stuff after that's a different story. Again, just looking at the driver profile. Driving distance distribution, 290 to 310. We got 13 tee shots. 13 tee shots. I can list all of these out. I'm not going to go through every single one, but you can see, I'll just count quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You have 9. We don't have a smaller half bucket. You have 9 of those 13 tee shots over 300. So yeah, hitting drivers decently far, but also reasonably straight is great. Hitting it just straight and short, no. Hitting it really far and crooked, no. Yeah, I need a guy that's going to gain strokes off the tee, which bakes in, how far they hit it and also how crooked it was. Off the tee is a fantastic stat this week. Driving accuracy, no. Driving distance, a little bit. Don't go crazy. All right. Approach buckets is pretty much wide open, guys. I'm not going to spend too much time here. You can see it if you're watching the YouTube video or on Spotify, which has the video content. 50 to 125, 125 to 150 are both around 15%. You got 150 to 175 at about 22.5%, 200 plus at 25%. Again, that goes hand in hand with the par fives and the par threes. 175 to 200, about 20%. Everything's pretty spread out. I think I've talked about this before. If you're using our FGB Studio and you're using Approach IQ, which is very specific shot by shot metrics, this is how I would view it. So you can, again, talking to myself, not talking to anybody listening to this as being simple, but talking to myself from 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You take a note. All right. When you're looking at approach data, when you're looking at 50 to 125 and even 125 to 150, but that's kind of borderline. Let's just bucket it together, right? 50 to 150 yards. You're okay to use proximity. You're okay to use proximity. Like there's enough there's enough data, and there's also enough data to back up what players are doing with those shots. They're usually going for the pin. So 50 to 150 yards, certainly 50 to 125. Proximity is fine. If you want to use strokes gained approach, that's probably better. We have strokes gained approach per shot, and then proximity, fine. My point is, if once you get into like the 200 plus and 175 to 200 plus, which you can do in approach IQ, you don't have to use the same data point for every single bucket. You don't just use strokes gained approach for all these different proximities or different approach distances, I guess. 200 plus, do not use proximity. Like the amount of skewage for any of these longer approaches. You're talking about a guy that's literally from 207 yards. Like he's going to hit the green half the time anyways, if that. And now you're going to penalize him because one guy or a couple guys hit it inside of 30 feet and he hasn't hit it inside of 30 feet yet in 6 shots this year, or 10 shots or 12 shots, whatever. No, but I want to see, okay, has he at least hit the green? So my point is, yes, 50 to 150 yards, proximity is fine. I think strokes gained approach in every bucket is fine. If you want to use proximity, which I know some people have a hard on for using proximity, you can use it in the shorter buckets. You think about Sam Burns drops a bucket of balls from 100 yards. Yeah, like the metric I would use to compare him to Scotty Scheffler is how close he hit those. Now, if we're talking about dropping a bucket of balls from 210 yards, like, yeah, like you can start to average out the proximity. But if Sam Burns hit 9 of 10 shots on the green and had a 3-foot worse proximity because Scotty hit 1 to a foot one time, I want Sam Burns approach play in that situation. Sam Burns hit more shots that are playable on the green. So again, using a broader bucket, what are their goals? 175 to 200 plus, I would use green regulation. Inside of 150, you can use prox and be pretty safe. 150 to 175, I don't know. You could go either way. I think you would still use just green regulation, strokes gain approach. So a good little caution there. Again, we'll probably build some tools where you can start to visually see how guys skew their approach data with wedges versus green regulation. And proximity is not the best gauge for, judging one player's a ball striking with their irons versus another, because 200 plus a proximity is very skewed, and it's also a much smaller sample size. So let's dive into the this is the past winners and lead-in stats. You kind of want to uncheck Scotty here and look through everybody. So we'll look at the time machine in just a second and just see if we can gauge anything. Obviously, Scotty's game the last couple of years with his putters has improved quite a bit. Scotty winning in 2022, 2023, he was in impeccable form. I mean, there's no two ways about it. Played fantastic leading in. To both of those years. 2022, played fantastic. That was with 20 rounds of lead-in stats, 12 shot link, gained in every single category. 2023, took a little more time off. He had 12 lead-in stat rounds. 6 of those were shot link. Basically his exact same schedule this year. Gained in every single category. We'll get into Scotty for a few tidbits here in just a second. He's not playing as good as he was in those years. 2024, 2025, much different story with Dietrich and Nick Taylor. But if we go back, in prior years, generally speaking, good ball striking form wins out here. Off the tee is a very strong stat besides Nick Taylor. But if you look at every single winner, I'll just go slow. Thomas Dietrich gaining off the tee, Scotty, Brooks, Webb even was gaining off the tee, Ricky Fowler off the tee, Gary Woodland, Hideki Matsuyama. So off the tee is a very, very strong stat this week. Approaches too. There's obviously winners that come in and figure it out that week. That's not our job to figure out who's going to magically, discover something from Joe Mayo or something. I know Joe Mayo is a short game coach, but you get the point. Let's see. I think that's pretty much it. Like I said, we'll look at time machine here in just a second. but there's really nothing too much to gain there. As far as course history goes, I got a couple notes on the guys that really stand out. As far as like top 10 finishes and stuff like that. Let's see. Jordan Spieth, T4, T6, T6. Obviously, Scotty has a great course history pretty much everywhere he plays. It's such a weird dynamic between what Scotty was prior to 2020, like between him graduating from school and then 2020 and then after 2020. It's pretty amazing. But Ricky Fowler has fallen off quite a bit. Second in 2016. If you look at 2016, a second, 2017, a T4, 2018, T11, and then a win. The last couple of years, miscut, T10, miscut, WD. So it's hard to really make sense of that, to be honest. Like the course history is definitely there as far as upside, but something's going on. I know he had a really rough 2021, 2022. 8,900 is a little bit expensive. I'll probably have some, but I just wanted to point that out, that it's a little bit tricky to understand where his course history lies at this point, where 4 of his last 5 years was either a miscut or a WD. Sam Burns, T3, T6, T3 through T6 in 2024, 2023. And I think that's pretty much it for the really interesting ones. Maverick McNealy's probably going to be a winner soon. He's playing really good golf. T6, T9 the last 2 years here. Might have to just jump on McNealy early this week. Let's see. Xander also with pretty good course history, 4 top 10s in his last 6 starts. Hasn't played the last 2 years for whatever reason. I don't remember why, to be honest. Cameron Young as well. So yeah, all the top guys, basically, if you look through the pricing, the DraftKings, besides, I guess Cameron Young's close in the last 2 years. Basically, DraftKings just priced all these guys with their course history, besides Scotty, just on another level. But you got Cameron Young, Hideki, Sam Burns. Fitz is probably like the odd one here at 9,300. That doesn't really make sense at all. Like at all. Really weird. He should be 8,300, I think. Who's 8,300? That should be up here. Probably Jordan Spieth, but then they looked at Jordan Spieth's form and said, well, we can't do that. So yeah, I think there's definitely a weird pricing with Fitzpatrick, in my opinion. McNealy, fantastic. Then JJ Spawn miscuts, Ricky Fowler miscuts. Ricky Fowler's a weird price. And they have some weird stuff with their course history algorithm. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's look at the time machine really quick. And then I think we can call it a show for now. Like I said, I'll do a full deep dive using Studio for our FGB members. All right, we can do top 10. So like I said, the off the tee is the biggest factor. You can go to the bottom here and scroll to the bottom, off the tee all the way down. Tee to green as well. You can look at approach and all the other stats. Off the tee consistently year over year is really good. There's some up and down with approach, and I think that's something to highlight. Like, you're not going to hit, our goal is to hit every single good play, but every single good play doesn't always perform, and every single good play in the tournament doesn't show out prior to that event. Jordan Spieth's an example. Christian Bezadenhout was literally the worst play on the entire slate, it seems. Dietrich was okay off the tee, but losing on approach around the green, like, he wouldn't have been popping for anybody. Let's see. McNealy looks fantastic and still looks fantastic. 2024, more of the same, a little bit better on approach numbers, but we got off the tee is really strong. Tee to green and total, like we talked about with the correlations, and we have some filters in FGB Studio, which is really cool. So like what I like to do, and this is probably a topic for another podcast, obviously, but for like off the tee and approach, there's guys that lose strokes a little bit off the tee. They have a better opportunity to gain strokes on approach. So obviously total and tee to green is summing all that together. If you want to look at off the tee and approach or off the tee and approach, we can do that in Studio now. You can say, I wanted someone gaining off the tee or gaining on approach. That checks either box, and I'm fine with that. Obviously, I would do some type of math on like tee to green or total and make sure like they're still positive. But we'll use like Nick Taylor as an example, who was gaining total in tee to green. If we heavily weighted off the tee and approached the same, he probably would have been forgotten at, losing a quarter of a shot off the tee. But had I said, yes, I want total and tee to green and gaining off the tee or approach, that's fine too. So there's interesting ways to dive into the data for sure. 2023, really quickly, you can see a lot of green and off the tee. Really, all the ball striking stats. This was a good year. I don't have too much commentary on this. You can see it's basically the entire field. If I expanded this to the entire field, you'll see as we scroll down, I don't know if I could do just total. But yeah, all the people, let's see, there's one miscut inside like the top. I don't know. Like top 50 in total, top 40 in total that missed the cut, one. So like total just by itself, fantastic. Tee to green, close. Morikawa sucks. Shane Lowry also, but pretty good. Like I said, just those two stats alone, you're doing a lot of work with very little effort. Scotty here, same thing. I mean, that's the entire field. Let's do top 10. Yeah. So, I mean, ball striking, tee to green, total, off the tee approach, pretty basic. I think that is it. We'll get a look at the weather really quick, and then we'll get us out of here. Thursday, 61 degrees up to 74 in the afternoon. We got a 4 mile per hour wind basically all day, 4 to 7, gusting 5 to 9. So basically perfect weather. Friday, the same thing, 3 to 4 mile per hour wind, 5 mile per hour gusts, basically perfect. Look for low scores. And then I'm just curious, looking at, see if I can scroll down here. Saturday, the best weather. I don't have Sunday yet. So that's where we're at. It looks fantastic. Outright model we can run really quickly, and then that'll be the final thing. And there wasn't a ton of top guy EV. Like I said, I think Maverick Neely is probably a good bet. Looking through his numbers, just because our sims don't shake him out as a plus EV bet doesn't mean you don't take advantage of someone that's maybe their form's lagging. And even in our system, even though we try to capture really short-term form. So let's see. This is, I think top 5s and 10s have a little bit more, a little bit more equity. But let's do sort by best EV. All right. Sam Stevens is number 1 on Bet365. Let's see. Yeah, about a 0.6% edge. McGreevy's next on DraftKings and Caesars, 0.5% edge. And I do like McGreevy. This is also a pretty good course for him. Patrick Rogers has been sneaky good and bad, which is probably his entire career. He's got a 5% or 0.5% edge on Caesars. I'd like to have a 5% edge. Let's look at top 5s. John Perry, a little bit bigger edges here in the top 5s. McGreevy and Mac Meissner, again, our sims seem to like them. Michael Brennan, John Perry's number 1 on Bet365. A lot of good values on Bet365. Let's see. I wonder if there's any made cut. Oh, yeah. Rafael Campos. You could get a pretty good juicy odds on these, round robin. 3 of these 6 to make the cut. I don't have miss cut odds, but let's see. Top 20. Takumi Kanaya got a 4% edge. Chandler Blanchett, Chandler Phillips. You got Chandler doubles, 4% edge. So there's a few values you can find. with that being said, I think we're good, guys. Hopefully that helped. Again, sorry to go on some tangents with some of the data, but it is important to note, I think that's one of the big advantages, just having the data behind golf courses and what players do at a course versus before the course is a big deal. There's plenty of analogies to bring up, and I'm sure the guys that have been listening to this podcast for the last couple of years are probably sick of hearing anyways, but we get new listeners, shockingly enough, every week. I think there's just a big gap in what the masses understand about golf data for an event versus what's reality. So trying to bridge the gap there. With that being said, I think that's it. It's enough spewing. Hopefully that did help. But yeah, looking forward to this week. It should be fun. You can check out fantasygolfbag.com. You can find me on Twitter at Redkacheek, and obviously follow Fantasy Golf Bag. We appreciate the support as always. You can check back tomorrow for some matchups. You can go to our matchups tool and get some EV bets really easily. Run our parlay optimizer really easily. So a lot of cool stuff. And then you can follow the live model. You can run your, check your lineups and your 6 of 6s in the live tournament stats, which is all free. So plenty of good stuff. With that, I'm signing out. See you guys. Best of luck this week. Looking forward to a fun week. See ya.